Today on CityCast DC, we're talking about the shooting of a police officer that could upend the status quo between local Washington and the Trump administration. We're talking about the sudden appearance of Zionism as a theme of the DC mayoral election. And we have animal news: pandas, eagles, and the next wild animal you might be talking about. Stick around to find out what it is. I'm here with NBC4's Mark Segraves and my CityCast colleague, Bridget Todd. Plus, in a members-only fourth segment, remember that January 6th pardon recipient who was arrested for assaulting women on the Metro? Bridget sits down with one of the people he serially stalked for a conversation about how we got here. Today is Tuesday, March 31st. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC's talking about. Hey, Bridget.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Bridget. Hey, Mike. How are you guys doing? Thanks for having me.
We're so glad you're here. So one of the things we're going to talk about today is you've been covering this shooting that took place last week of an undercover park police officer. The authorities, including the MPD, initially hinted that it was an intentional ambush, which is to say that the accused gunman maybe knew he was police and opened fire. They've now sort of backed away from that. There's murky details, and I don't know that they're going to get any less murky soon. But what is the state of that, Mark?
Yeah, as you said, this is a crazy kind of narrative that happened. And yes, you're right. Ambush is not the correct term to use. Working undercover is not the correct term to use for the officer. But what we do know is that these two brothers who have been charged with shooting this park police officer. This is a whole weekend event. So this started on Friday. At the Anacostia Park along the Anacostia River, where there was a shooting. No one was injured, no one was arrested, but it happened on federal park land, so park police had been investigating that. So that happened on Friday. Then you fast forward to Sunday, where one of the two brothers who was ultimately arrested for the shooting was arrested for dealing fentanyl, also in a federal park, by a park police officer. It so happens that the park police officer who arrested him on Sunday is the same park police officer who he shot on Monday. So the one brother, these brothers are 21 and 22 years old. The one brother is arrested on Sunday for dealing fentanyl in a park. He appears in court. It appears that at least one of the brothers has no criminal history at all. So he's arrested on Sunday on fentanyl. He appears in court on Monday for his presentation, and he's released pending his trial. So then he calls up his grandmother, who comes and picks him up from the DC jail. They drive over to the park police headquarters in Anacostia Park to pick up his belongings that were confiscated when he was arrested. This is very routine for anybody who's arrested and then released. So he shows up at park police headquarters to get his belongings, I'm guessing wallet, phone, whatever. He grabs that stuff, gets back in the SUV driven by his grandmother, and they're headed home. Well, on the way home, they realize they're being followed. And we know all of this from the charging documents, from their cell phone texting transmissions, and in fact, what the two brothers told detectives when they were interviewed. So they're driving home. They notice they're being followed by a white Tesla with tinted, blacked out windows. They can't see who's driving. They just know they're being followed. So he calls his brother and tells him, hey, we're headed home. We're being followed. He gets to his house. According to the charging documents, the brother who had been arrested, who was returning home, jumps out of the car and confronts the Tesla in the middle of the street, banging on the hood. I'm not going to speculate as to what he was thinking, but it appears that he didn't know this was a police officer. He had no idea who was following him, only that he was being followed. You can kind of connect the dots, what might have been going through his head and why he would confront this person. The officer tries to avoid him and speed away. And that's when the other brother comes out, and the two brothers produce, one has a Glock 9, one has an AR-15, and they fire about 32 shots at this car, striking the officer twice in the shoulder with non-life threatening injuries. The officer is able to drive a few more blocks away before he comes to a stop. He calls for help. There are citizens on the scene that administer first aid. Police show up. They medevac him to the hospital. Almost right away, they find one of the guns behind the house. They arrest one of the brothers within maybe right away, certainly within an hour or so, and they detain the grandmother and question her through all this.
Mark, do we know? Do we have any? I mean, the story sounds so strange to me. Do we know if this officer was following them as part of
Yes.
some sort of investigation?
And that's an excellent question. And this is one of the, when you get into the murky stuff, according again to the charging documents, the officer was following him because this officer was investigating that Friday shooting at the Anacostia Park. And he believed one or both of these brothers were suspects in that Friday shooting at Anacostia Park. So that connects all the dots there to Friday, Sunday, Monday, the three different incidents that happened. So he's trying, according to the officer, he was following him to try to get a location where he was living. I would assume that so that they could do a search warrant looking for the guns that were used in that shooting in Anacostia Park. But that's his explanation.
But listen, if you've got this person who they believe to be in a dangerous life, right? They think he might have been involved in a shooting. They know that he has been dealing drugs. I think following someone or following someone's grandmother very closely in a tinted car is not a good way to like de-elevate a confrontation. In fact, it almost begs a confrontation. Are they actually trained to do that? Because it seems to me there's probably easier ways of finding them.
That's a great question. And the answer to that from every detective that I've talked to about this situation is that no, that's not the right way to go out by yourself. That's the key thing, that this officer was operating alone by himself. Although he was in communication, they say, with other officers, there were no other officers in the immediate vicinity. So he was doing this by himself. And that puts the officer, as we see it play out, in real risk. I mean, look, 32 shots. He's lucky that he got just two bullet wounds that are non-life threatening. And
Yeah.
everybody's lucky that, I mean, this was, I believe it was like 7 o'clock in the evening in a very nice, busy residential neighborhood where anybody could have been out walking their dog, coming home from school, coming home from work. It's amazing that nobody else was injured. But yeah, that's one of the big questions that will probably never get answered because we know park police are reluctant to ever answer questions on anything they do. But what we do know is that he was following them alone for that purpose. And by all accounts from officers that I've talked to, that is not the best or safest protocol to use for anybody involved in this situation. And so at first, the brothers said that they didn't fire, but then they were confronted with surveillance video. There's a lot of surveillance video from doorbell cameras that captured this. And so now they're faced with these charges. Now, you mentioned in your lead up to this, Michael, that this kind of puts the district government at odds with the Trump administration because they were charged with 5 counts. Only one of them is a federal count. If this had happened years ago, a couple years ago, a year ago, this would have ended up in D.C. Superior Court. But Jeanine Pirro and the U.S. Attorney, as is their prerogative, took this to federal court. There's one charge of assault with intent to kill a federal officer. So one of the 5 charges is a federal charge. So they took this into federal court where they will now be tried or work out a plea deal. We'll have to wait and see how this actually plays out. But this is another example of Jeanine Pirro, who has said, she wants to be able to prosecute 12-year-olds for some crimes, trying to get the maximum sentencing and accountability, if you will, on these cases, and taking them. This is what we're seeing more of the USAO taking things to federal court rather than DC Superior.
And running through all this is this assumption that the police, the law enforcement, the authorities of the District of Columbia are unwilling or unable to prosecute people the way they deserve to be prosecuted, and that the citizens of the District of Columbia, the ones who sit on juries, are similarly too soft-hearted to put these young punks away where they belong. But I gotta ask, because this is the park police, because they are expanding wildly, because they run these super aggro paramilitary ads recruiting people. It comes back to if the Metropolitan Police Department had been handling this, if they had been trying to connect these guys to a drug dealing charge or a gun charge or a shooting charge, which is after all, that is the job of cops. I gotta think they might have handled it better. And this is sort of one in a series of knocks on the park police who, according to critics, are too quick on the trigger, too aggressive. Like this, if you've got someone who you believe to be a drug dealer, and you're following him super closely, turn after turn after turn, that person's liable to think like, this is one of my rivals who I, need to deal with, and that's going to cause a shooting. It just seems like, I can't believe I even have to say this, but I don't want to justify either people like firing shots willy-nilly at people following them, whether those people are police or not. And I think it's a really bad idea to have people running around with automatic weapons. But like, it's sort of this situation where I feel like as a District of Columbia residents, you get kind of set up where you've got sort of subpar police departments on the street. And then when the consequences of their actions come out, and in some cases wind up getting people off who really shouldn't be on the streets, the city get blamed for not being tough enough.
Yeah, I mean, you summarized it perfectly right there. And one of the MPD detectives, DC police detectives, who I talked to about this, kind of laughed and said, the U.S. Park Police constantly make MPD look like geniuses because they do things so poorly. It makes MPD, because MPD doesn't make these kind of mistakes. I mean, you don't have to look back far to remember the case where they pulled over somebody and a park police officer got in the car with a suspect and ended up shooting him. In one case, again, you don't want to blame the victim, and you don't want to justify illegal guns and automatic weapons and just senseless shootings in the middle of the street like that. But yes, there has to be some contributory negligence assigned to that park police officer who decided to go by himself and follow this person and you described it perfectly. Yeah, if you're a drug dealer just getting out of jail and you're locked and loaded and you're being followed by a Tesla with blacked out windows, it's easy to jump to the conclusion that might be somebody who's looking to do you harm.
Mark, how did the initial narrative about this being an ambush, how did that get out? Because as soon as I heard that, I thought, well, that doesn't sound right to me.
This is a very interesting press conference to go back and watch. One, it was a late night press conference, right? So you don't get the entire press corps. You don't get the dayside press corps. You get people who are showing up at a crime scene late at night. I think there was only a couple of reporters there. And then you have the chief of police of the park police and the chief of police for MPD. And if you go back and listen to that press conference, interim chief Carroll from MPD was much more cautious and in the end factual about what he said. He used the word targeted, and it was targeted, right? And so the chief of police for the park police used the word ambush. You can see on Chief Carroll's face, and then when he's asked the questions, that he did not use that same word ambush. He also didn't use the word undercover. That was actually a reporter's question who said, was this cop working undercover? And the park police chief said yes, and they were ambushed. And so park police, again, they don't deal with the press and the public a lot. They don't give a lot of press conferences. They don't answer a lot of questions. This is not just this park police chief. This goes back forever dealing with the park police. In my almost 30 years of covering crime in the District of Columbia, the U.S. Park Police Department is one of the hardest agencies to actually get in front of a camera and get answers on. And so that's why you saw some of this misinformation coming out of that press conference.
Mark, let me ask you one more question, because I know we got to jump to another subject, but you've alluded a couple times in this conversation to what MPD detectives are telling you. And you've just described this scene with the park police sort of not having a culture of answering basic media questions or by extension, citizen questions. If they're a jerk to you or unhelpful to you, well, that's too bad. But if they go out and do negligent things or overly hostile things, it makes it harder for them to make a case and makes it easier for bad guys to stay on the street. And I'm curious, in your conversations with cops, like, is there in the mind of like DC cops, Is there a hierarchy of all the other forces who are on the street? Like, who are the biggest knuckleheads and who are actually pretty competent?
There is, but that's as much as I'm going to say. Look, you're in a city that has probably 30 different police forces, right? Of all different levels of ability and training. And we saw this play out on January 6th, right? With the US Capitol Police. And we know now they didn't have the proper training for that. And it was, as former Chief Bob Conti said so perfectly at the time, it was MPD who restored democracy that day. Capitol Police were overwhelmed and undertrained and underprepared for that day. And they stood the line, and we saw a lot of very brave US Capitol Police officers that day, without a doubt. And it is not their fault that they didn't have the proper training going into this. And they spend the majority of their days, and it's the same thing with the Uniformed Secret Service Division, right? Guarding monuments, directing traffic, doing things unlike MPD, who are responding to 911 calls, whether they be traffic infractions, which we saw a police officer got hit and run the other day that ended up, the same driver hit a Virginia state trooper in the police chase. They handle that kind of stuff up to large protests with hundreds of thousands of people. They're equipped, they're trained, they know how to do all that every single day. So, yes, I believe you'd be hard to argue that most people in this ecosystem don't believe that MPD sits atop of the pile of the pyramid for training and whatnot. They're not perfect. They make mistakes like everybody does. But when you start going down that pyramid of different law enforcement agencies, you have a lot of officers in some of these branches that are retired from other departments and are collecting a pension and, are looking to kind of double dip and to keep working and to keep making money. And so, yes to your answer, I'm not going to rate them other than to say, we'll put MPD at the top.
As a certified taco lover, I am very excited for this. District Bridge's Torre del Taco returns to DC for its 4th year. Here's how it works. From April 1st to April 30th, food lovers like me can earn points by exploring local taco and pupusa restaurants and supporting small businesses. Complete challenges in the free online game to score points and win the ultimate title of DC's Taconasaur. And new this year, in-person taco crawls in Columbia Heights, Mount Pleasant, Cleveland Park, and 14th Street, where you get to vote on your favorite and be entered to win cool swag. Sign up for free and start earning points today at districtbridges.org/Torre del Taco.
Don't miss Folger's Theaters As You Like It, playing now through April 19th at the Folger Shakespeare Library. Envisioned by artistic director Karen Ann Daniels and directed by Timothy Douglas, this vibrant production is a love note to DC, with the Forest of Arden evoking the vibes, culture, and character of some of the district's favorite spaces. Featuring choreography from Tony Thomas of Folger Theater's Helen Hayes Award-winning production of Metamorphoses, and original music by Grammy Award nominee Kokai, don't miss this take on Shakespeare's playful and musical comedy. Tickets start at $20 and can be purchased online at folger.edu or by phone at 202-544-7077. Get yours today. Another thing that's going on this week, it seems like a very how to run for mayor in 2026 story, which is that all of a sudden the DC Democratic mayoral primary has been talking about what people think about Israel, Palestine, and the concept of Zionism. This, just to be clear, is a subject that no DC mayor has any say-so over. And I know from, I think the first mayoral election in DC I covered was 1998. There was, it was in the middle of the Bosnian genocide. There was no questions about that asked. But what's happened in the last week is that according to news reports, Janice Lewis-George, who's the Democratic Socialists of America member running for mayor, has launched a very strong run. She seems to have a lot of popular support. Had a meeting with a group of rabbis and Jewish leaders in which she apologized for the hurt that was caused by her answer to a questionnaire from the Democratic Socialists of America, where she promised to not take part in any Zionist events as mayor. And this, hurt some people's feelings because I don't know what a Zionist event is, but people could read it, I think, reasonably and say you're not going to take part in any event where you have to do something with the members of the Jewish community, almost all of whom believe in the existence of Israel. She was then slammed by her opponent, Kenyon McDuffie. This apology of hers, it was not exactly like a full-throated apology. It was private, and it was saying I am never going to exclude any community. I mean, she's saying all the right things, but she wasn't saying I disavow the thing I wrote. And, maybe it'll be an issue in the campaign or maybe not. But to me, it's why on earth would you even answer a question like that? You have a very reasonable response, which is I'm running for a job that has nothing to do with any of that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think she kind of stepped on a rake here. And I think we can take notes from what we just saw go down with the election of Mamdani in New York. I remember a debate where they asked all the candidates, if elected, when are you going to go to Israel? And they were all like, oh, I'll go to Israel my first week. And he said, I'm going to be focused on representing the people who elected me here in New York. And, I think she's got to know that there's a whole bunch of people who are looking to brand her as an extremist, as the most extreme version of whatever it is that she represents. And I think, a little bit of a self-own on this one, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's no doubt that this is probably the first biggest negative. As you said, Michael, she came out of the gate strong, well organized, a lot of endorsements, a lot of money, well ahead of Kenyon McDuffie and all of those counts when she first launched her campaign. McDuffie's been playing catch up and been doing a good job of catching up, endorsement wise, money wise, not going to as many of these events as Louis George is going to. But for me, the flip side to this is that, this has actually been percolating for a couple of weeks now. The original article that came out,
Yep.
and I apologize that I have forgotten the name of the.
It appeared in Jewish Insider, which is a pretty conservative group of people,
which the Janice Louis George camp will point out is dominated by Kenyon McDuffie supporters. And, they're calling this a hit job by McDuffie's camp. What I will say is that for the past couple of weeks, since that article first came out, the McDuffie camp has been pushing this hard on reporters, right? Pushing reporters to cover this, to dip their toe into this, to report this. But all the while, McDuffie's saying nothing about it. And, I know myself and a couple of other reporters have expressed this to McDuffie campaign that we weren't going to carry his water for him. And if he's not, going to bring it up. And, several of us went to the Ward 3 debate. And this was, what a perfect place to bring this up for McDuffie, right? In upper Northwest, 200 to 300 people sitting in that church. I'm sure some of them had to have been Jewish, and McDuffie made no note of it whatsoever. And a lot of us noted that Janice Louis George looked a little nervous sitting up there with the other candidates, as if she might have been expecting the shoe to drop on this story that McDuffie was going to bring up.
What's your read of McDuffie not saying anything? Is he?
I gotta say, it's kind of par for the course for McDuffie, where he lacks a lot of specificity. So, he didn't bring it up at all at the Ward 3 debate. Then he puts out a statement that doesn't name Janice Louis George, that alludes to this controversies that's brewing and saying that he'll meet with anyone, that he would never say that he would not meet with somebody, but not going the full Monty and saying, hey, Janice Louis George said this, that's wrong, here's my position. And so it wasn't now until the Washington Post yesterday finally did pick the story up and write on the story, and now we're talking about it. So it's getting out there. But I think this is politics, right? This is where we're at now. This is a close race between two heated rivals who are going to have a lot of money. They're not the only ones running. I think, when the petitions came in, there's 8 or 9 candidates who submitted petitions. We'll find out later in April how many of them actually survived the challenge period and end up on the ballot. But there's going to be more than just these two candidates there. But McDuffie has been really trying to get a lot of attention. You saw the Ward 8 debate where, he acted out at the end and had the mic drop moment that, his camp really loved and thought was a lot of energy. And, they were happy to put that out there. And a lot of people on the other side said, this is not how a mayor should act. This wasn't, it was rude what he did. So we're seeing it really heat up now in this race, because this is the most consequential election cycle in any of our lives in the history of home rule here in Washington, D.C. We're going to have more change in the makeup of our elected officials and more special elections over the next 8 to 12 months than we've ever seen. And we're going to have a new mayor, and we're going to have a new delegate, and we're going to have at least 2 or more new council members. And it's a lot of change. There's a lot at stake here, and we're really starting to see it heat up.
Let me go back though to the proximate controversy here, because it seems to me like, Bridget, your point's totally an accurate one, that people who don't like Janice are going to try to make her look like sort of every irritating recent college graduate you've ever met, who's
including myself at a certain time in my life.
Right.
I know exactly the framing they're going for here.
And that's sort of a double hit, where on the one hand, maybe some people disagree with the proximate views. But on the other hand, many, many more people would say, I would really rather have a mayor who doesn't spend any energy thinking about the Middle East or anything else that doesn't have to do with like proper running of the DC government. So there's a lot of people who want to pin that on her. I think she has done sort of an okay job of avoiding it. Mamdani, I think, did a masterful job of making it clear that his sole focus was the material conditions of the lives of his citizens. There's been a couple of other sort of things in the George campaign, like we joked about this reel she made about composting, which again is I think probably not a good thing to spend your time talking about if you're trying to improve the material conditions of people's lives. But I would say that there's another group, smaller but hyper devoted, who very much want to hang the radical image on Janice Lewis George because they share that radicalism. And that is, those are your allies, but that's a similar group you kind of want to dodge, because just as a matter of math, there's going to be some people in the world who have appalling views on Gaza, whatever you happen to think is appalling. And maybe they will agree with you on like garbage collection and school system administration and law enforcement and that kind of taxes and vice versa. And you probably, there's people whose interest is in having mayors and city council members and school board members and everyone else take a stand on their pet global issue or national issue, which they think is an essential question of justice. But I think the skill of a city politician is maybe sort of avoiding that, even when it comes from people who really like you.
It's definitely a tightrope. I think you described it very well. It reminds me of a conversation that you and I once had where they were going to be doing a tax rebate if you installed a bidet. And I said, I have a bidet. I love bidets. I think this is great. Flushable wipes are terrible for our septic systems. We should
Right.
do it. And then you said, do you think your average DC resident who was like just trying to get food on the table wants to hear about this bidet initiative? And I thought, okay, fair point. Perhaps this is me, I think I'm exactly the person that you just described who wants to talk about composting and all of these kind of annoying issues, but also totally gets that they might turn a lot of people off, and maybe they're not issues that we need to be leading on, even while I might agree that they might make a difference in people's lives. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And every day you're talking about like who dissed which group over Israel-Palestine is a day you're not talking about like the cost of daycare.
Exactly. As much as I love springtime in DC, it also means allergy season. And as somebody with severe allergies, that means spring in DC can be rough. And did you know that if your windows are not properly installed or insulated, pollen can still make its way into your home, even if your windows are closed? So what better time to replace those busted old windows than Window Nation's The More You Buy, The More You Save sale going on now. You can save up to 50% off all the windows for your home. Window Nation's installation crews will finish the job in 1 day or less, so you can enjoy the rest of summer with minimal disruption. Best of all, they offer a lifetime warranty on all their windows, so you can relax knowing your home is protected far into the future. You better hurry because the sale ends soon. Schedule a fast, free consultation now at windownation.com.
Let's jump out of this question and talk about something more pleasant, which is cute animals or not cute animals. In this case, there's been 3 different animal stories dominating headlines, or not quite dominating, but this week.
DC right now is basically that show Love Island, but for animals. There's drama, intrigue, makeups, breakups. So first up, bald eagles. We have a relationship here in the district that has been mired in some scandal. You might have thought that DC's most famous, insider political couple is Michelle and Barack Obama. If you thought that, you are wrong, because it is actually a pair of bald eagles known as Mr. President, or Mr. P for short, and Lotus, which is short for Lady of the United States. And I can report that they have at least one eaglet on the way, which is pretty exciting.
And what's the eaglet going to be called?
Ooh, oh gosh. Is there an acronym for first kid, first eagle?
Eagle McEagleface.
So this is pretty cute. The city's wildlife biologist, Dan Roush, took a helicopter eagle flyover ride to get a bird's eye view of all the nests in the area.
So to speak.
And counted. Exactly. Thank you for appreciating my pun. Pun not intended, but appreciated. And found 14 active nests of bald eagles, including the first couple at the Arboretum. I have to report, though, their relationship has been a little bit of a storied love affair. Mr. President first showed up at Kingman Island more than a decade ago. He found his mate, First Lady, in 2013. People loved them. They were like a couple, a standout star couple. They made history because it was the first time that a bald eagle pair had been at the Arboretum in over 60 years. So we loved it. Usually, bald eagles mate for life as long as they are successfully having babies, but they are known to wander and to stray and have a little bit of a wandering eye. Mr. President and First Lady at first did not produce offspring. And so First Lady would jet off in warmer months and then come back in the fall, doing God knows what, probably getting bottle service in Miami and being in some other guy's VIP. We have no idea what she was up to. During one of her trips, Mr. President was caught cheating with another female suitor in the nest. Apparently, it got very ugly. At times, the First Lady would chase them off with her talons out, flying toward the nest at 50 to 60 miles per hour, which is pretty scary. I mean, imagine seeing that out on the street on a night out, just 2 eagles going at it over a man.
Well, I do want to just say on the eagle thing, while it's a great story, I'm fortunate. I've got 2 eagles' nests near my house here on the Chesapeake Bay. Both have offspring this year. But what's so great and great about the work that Dan Roush does at the Department of Environment for DC is this resurgence of bald eagles in the Potomac Basin area just speaks so greatly about how healthy the Potomac River is at a time where we've seen hundreds of millions of gallons of sewage go into the river. But this is an indicator of just how healthy our ecosystem is, that not just bald eagles, but ravens have made a comeback. And I saw a bald eagle the other day in Rock Creek Park, but ravens have made a comeback as well. And that really does speak volumes about how healthy our rivers are, how healthy our ecosystem is here in this, from all through the Potomac River down through the Chesapeake Bay. So the eagle story is a great story, and Dan Roush does great work. And I fear every day when there are budget cuts that's the kind of job that will get cut by politicians who don't really see the value in tracking our wildlife population.
Also, pandas in the news.
That is right. I know David Plotz's least favorite animal out there, the panda. So we have Bao Li and Qing Bao. They're flirting, which is a sign, according to zookeepers, that they could successfully mate in the coming years. If they did have a cub, it would be a major milestone. It would be the first time in decades that a pair of giant pandas has successfully bred naturally at the facility. So keep an eye out. We could have some more baby pandas out there.
And then the third animal story is one I think that we will be talking about a lot in the future, which is that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is giving millions and millions of dollars for a leopard habitat at the National Zoo. It's very rare that zoos have this animal, and it's there's a tradition of somewhat unsavory foreign governments, starting with Chairman Mao's giving big gifts to the National Zoo and enabling young Washingtonians to enjoy the animal cuteness. But that is, it's not there yet. My prediction is leopards will be the pandas of the 21st century.
You heard it here first.
Hey, Mark, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me, you guys.
And I want to give a big thank you to our newest CityCast DC members, Andrew G. and Preeta P. And we've got some neighborhood shout outs from our members as well. Jesse S. thinks Elizabeth's pupuseria in the heart of Petworth is super underrated. And Riza L. is shouting out the Safe Sisters Circle and their executive director, Nellie Guzman, for ensuring Black women in DC experiencing domestic and intimate partner violence can get free, culturally specific legal representation. And Garlic Girl Vintage in Adams Morgan is Kate Y's new go-to for shopping and gift giving. Today, paid subscribers can get a bonus 4th roundup chat about a pardoned January 6th rioter and white supremacist who was arrested for assaulting women on the Metro. Bridget sat down with one of the people he has harassed, and their conversation gets into the long, really gross backstory behind his latest arrest. If you want to be sure you always get the full episode, please become a member. Head to membership.citycast.fm and sign up. It's only $10 a month. Members get ad-free listening, an extra events newsletter every week, a shout out for your favorite business or nonprofit on the pod, and so much more. Again, that's membership.citycast.fm. And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. Our production team this week was Annie Reese, Julia Karen, and Matthew Rogers. Newsletter editors Kayla Cote-Stemmerman and McKenna Harford wrote our fabulous newsletter, CityCast DC, this week. And our hosts are Bridget Todd, hey Bridget, and me, Michael Schaefer. Music is by Alex Roldan, with additional music from Triple Scoop Music via Getty Images. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell everyone about it at the Panda House? We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.